Folks, it's funny because I was waiting for the questions to come in and I was thinking, all right, I'm going to ask you a question to start as we're waiting for some of these questions to come in. But in fact, the first question came in and it is the question I was going to ask you. So all we've heard, well, all those of us who've been paying attention have heard is this curriculum sucks. Is there anything good about it? Is there anything worth salvaging in it that we should be focused on, particularly in the areas that may well be implemented next fall? So Robin, why don't I start with you?
Sure, and it is a great question. And I will say that there is, in terms of the English language arts, there are some redeeming features. I think that what I noticed right away is that the draft curriculum provides some clarity around beginning reading that honestly would be supportive to teachers going forward. So I actually, thought that if we could take some of that good work that is there and actually revise as all curriculum needs to be revised. This is a 20-year-old curriculum we're talking about. If it could somehow be integrated into the curriculum, particularly in for those of you who know the curriculum well, general objective number 2, which really does focus on reading. It would, I think, give teachers a little bit more support, especially new teachers who, might still be, and many of us are always developing our skills in teaching reading. But I could see some of what is there now actually, impacting in a positive way the current curriculum in a revision kind of way. So that was one of the redeeming features that I thought we could actually make use of going forward.
That's really why I wanted to start with you, Robin, because I've heard that. I've heard a lot of demonization of current reading teaching techniques, which I'm not sure I buy. But I have heard that some of the very basic fundamental stuff for early readers makes a lot of sense. So you would say that's an improvement then over what we have now?
Well, what I would say is I think that material is in the current curriculum. I mean, I can find it. But, I'm, someone who is very experienced with curriculum. I've been in education for, 30 years. So I don't really buy the argument that that the government tried to make when they said this was missing and this was missing and this was missing. I actually went through the curriculum and found the things that they said were missing. However, I do think that we could be more clear in the present curriculum about what the reading components are and how important they are. So I do like that they're naming the components. They're talking about phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension in very specific terms. So, I don't buy everything that the government said in terms of how they characterized the current English language arts curriculum, but anything that supports teachers developing knowledge of teaching reading, certainly I support that.
Thank you. Angela, your thoughts?
Well, I'm just going to start with, so I became a teacher in 1996 and Dr. Robin Bright was my English language arts teacher at the University of Lethbridge. So it's just such a thrill to be here.
She became a professor when she was like 10 years old.
Yes. Yeah, apparently so. So what I'm going to say is, so after that, I was a grade 1 teacher using the previous curriculum. And somehow at the end of grade 1, all my little monkeys were reading. So yes, there may have been some things that we could have done differently, but it's such a combination of, back to the basic facts of this is what the letter M sounds like, and this is what it looks like, and these are the words that we can start to create with it, along with the critical thinking and analysis and writing their own stories. So there is, like what Robin said, the foundations are there. And it is the job of the curriculum to be so clear that any teacher could take it and create a lesson plan and automatically use it. And when I look at this, so yes, there are some essential facts, essential knowledge that is there, that is very, very reasonable. including in my area in the phys ed and wellness curriculum. But what's missing in this draft, there's three main components that we need to think of: the what of what to teach, the why, so the conceptual knowledge of why we need to teach it and why kids need to learn it, and then there's the how, the procedural knowledge. And the current curriculum that's being used and the 2018 draft have all three components. The 2021 draft only has the what. And in reviewing the PE and wellness curriculum, what I've seen is like the 2018 draft was collaboratively written and nonpartisan, had all of the components there, a brilliant scope and sequence. And I've literally seen places where the knowledge of the 2018 draft was cut and pasted into the 2021 draft with none of the procedural and conceptual knowledge. So yes, I agree that some of the facts are there, but it is not sufficient. It can be done in such a better way.
Can you speak a little bit more to the health and wellness piece? I mean, that's meant to be implemented, 5-6 short months from now. And I was intrigued by phys ed and wellness. It sort of made sense to me. But then when I looked at some of the details, I sort of thought, this doesn't feel like phys ed or wellness. And what's your professional thought on what that curriculum looks like?
Well, so I'm not a phys ed person, but looking at the phys ed curriculum and speaking to phys ed teachers, you really need a kinesiology degree in order to teach phys ed. Like, it is literally just this random facts of phys ed without the conceptual and procedural knowledge. So I don't know who messes up kindergarten phys ed, but this one is messed up. So that's really all I can say about the phys ed component. For the wellness component, which I've spent the last 20 years studying, it is so far away from what comprehensive school health looks like. So comprehensive school health was a joint initiative between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. Like even across Canada, we have the joint consortium for comprehensive school health across Canada. And so comprehensive school health is multiple layers of health and well-being. So physical, emotional, mental, relational, spiritual, occupational, and environmental, and planetary health. And what this draft does is it basically takes a few components of physical health and says kids need to learn these things. What was frightening to me in looking at the draft now, for example, the government is talking about, oh, we've got consent, we're working on emotional regulation and perseverance and resiliency. Well, the way they've done it just doesn't make sense. For example, in the kindergarten curriculum, it doesn't make sense to have 4 out of 5 objectives telling 4 and 5-year-old children, so ages 4 and 5, to go be by themselves if they feel strong emotions. It doesn't make any sense to be doing that. And then I did a review last year of the original draft and was appalled. And now I did a review of the revisions to the curriculum and I'm even more appalled because now I consider it a Frankenstein draft where they've taken little Post-it notes and cut and paste wording from parent and public feedback and are just sticking it into the curriculum. For example, I brought up the fact in May of 2021 that this curriculum, by focusing on calorie counting, by focusing on fitness programs, by telling kids to weigh themselves, that they were setting children up for eating disorders. All this government has done is taken the word weight out of the curriculum and cut and paste the word body image and put it in instead. That does not create a usable curriculum for teachers to teach.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. But before I go to Carla, I see the questions are coming in fast and furious, which is great. We do have 4 people on the panel, and we're going to go through all 4 of them here. But if you want to direct a question to a specific member of the panel, please feel free to do so. We're going to try and keep this as lively a conversation as we can. I just wanted to make sure that we got through all the members of the panel in this initial question, both to answer the question on what redeeming qualities are there, and also, as we've seen in the first two speakers, to give us a bit of context on where they're coming from as well. So Carla, I'll turn it over to you now. We'll start with, what are the redeeming qualities?
Well, that's like the hardest question to start with for the social studies curriculum for sure. But I will give an attempt at an answer. You're right. I've spent a lot of time looking at this draft curriculum. Some people in the audience might remember there were documents leaked in the fall of 2020, which were sort of the pre-draft of a couple of subject areas. So I started looking at what was being produced, back in 2020, and including up until the social studies blueprint, which was released just, I think that was December, where they've said they're going to provide a framework for revising the draft curriculum that was released in March. So I've looked at all of those documents over time. Here's two things I can say, and they're pretty small. One is that they've kept the sort of central elements of what makes up social studies in the curriculum. So they've kept history, they've kept geography, they've kept government and politics and civics, they've kept economics. What they've left out are things like sociology, anthropology, that whole how we relate to one another. That has been completely dropped as one of the elements of social studies, but they have kept these other pieces. The other sort of positive thing that I would identify is that they've brought in much more attention to world religions, which, if done well, can be a very powerful way to build understanding amongst students and people in our community. I don't mean indoctrination into a faith. I mean, learning about different religious cultures and so on. However, it's not done well in this curriculum. It's just long lists of information with no attempt to, as was said in the debate, there's no attempt at meaning making.
One of the things that concerns me, and if I have to say many, many times, and I'll continue to say many times, these are my opinions, not the opinions of the Alberta Teachers Association or Calgary Public Teachers. But one of the things that's been bothering me, and it has to do, I dealt with this government a lot. And one of the challenges that I've had is that at the surface level, they say a lot of things that make sense. But the challenge really becomes, how do you go beyond that? How do you go one level deeper? And so when you talk about the world religions, for example, or when I look at the Indigenous aspects of the curriculum, the first sentence is good. But then I find that, and I'm just really asking you sort of, what do you think? Am I completely out to lunch here question? But I find that when you go a little bit deeper, you find that it's a remarkably Western-centric, Christian-centric, othering kind of view. When we welcome the Muslims to Canada, we allowed them to. Am I just too sensitive about that? Or is that really part of the concern here? You're teaching about world religions, but in a sense of those people over there do this.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's 100% accurate. That's exactly how I would analyze this entire curriculum, whether we're talking about the world religions piece or the integration of Indigenous knowledges or women or the complete absence of LGBTQ plus communities. It is absolutely Eurocentric, white, Western, Judeo-Christian centric, and everything else is compared to that, to those positions which are positioned as the norm. And that is what makes this, one of the things that makes this curriculum hugely problematic, because one of the outcomes in the social studies curriculum mentioned something about, newcomers here experience racism because they bring strange traditions.
Yeah.
To Canada. Well, but you can't get much more othering than that. And so, yes, that observation is absolutely spot on.
Thanks. Medeana, I'm going to turn to you now. You've been in the trenches of this for a while. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on redeeming qualities. And I'm going to pick on you for one other thing, because the one thing we haven't talked about with our other panelists is the math curriculum. And I'm interested to know what you're hearing from parents about the math curriculum, because ostensibly that was the whole reason we started this, because the new government wanted to look at the math curriculum, and look what we ended up with. So Medeana, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, now I've got to rethink what I was going to say.
Okay, no, say what you were going to say first. Ignore me, and then I'll come back. We'll come back to that other question.
Okay. So what's redeeming? Well, my fellow panelists are very generous, because SOS's position is that when you approach a curriculum the way the UCP has in this instance, it is so flawed that it's really not salvageable. And I think you end up with the problem that Dr. Grace mentioned, where some parts get fixed and then other parts get lost. So I think nobody wants to throw anything out that's been worked at, other than the UCP wanting to throw out the 2018 draft curriculum. But I think that's what has to happen. And we have to go back to an apolitical process. So this has been a completely politicized, and your comment about math is, yes, that was one of the myths that was presented to the public of what needs to be fixed. A lot of what's been presented has been sort of fear-mongering that our children and our education system is failing. And that is absolutely false. Like, I feel as though this was a setup, right? There was this narrative that the NDP had sort of socially engineered the previous curriculum. Well, that is also a myth. It actually began under the PC government. And it was a long, arduous work. And the thought that you would just dismiss all of those perspectives and contributions and then replace it with about a dozen people. I mean, there's just so many flaws. There was not due care and attention given to the development of this curriculum. It's sloppy. I don't think it deserves to stand. I don't think we should be looking for redeeming qualities. I think we should call it what it is, and try to reconvene those previous curriculum working groups, and try to make sure that this process is airtight from politicians playing political football with our children. Quite frankly, they're wasting our time, they're wasting our money. Now you're gonna have to re-ask me about the math, because I'm all worked up.
Anything good about the math?
Well, I'm not a math professor. I'll say that. So I can't really speak to that specifically, but what I will say is the criticisms about this idea that our children are learning, that we're not learning numeracy, is false. I've got 4 kids. They are definitely learning numeracy, and they're not using discovery math, which is also not really a thing whatsoever. Kids are not, being left to go and discover math on their own. So these are the reason for building this curriculum that was justified to scrap the 2018 curriculum is really based on lies in SOS's opinion.
Yeah, thanks for being that blunt. I don't have any kids, but I have 2 nieces, and I will tell you they are both, super geniuses, because they're my nieces and luckily missed all my genes. But going through with them, they're 5 years apart, and going through with them how they were learning math was fascinating to me, because yes, they memorized the times tables. They know their times tables, but each of them, 5 years apart, over Christmas, sat with me and tried to teach me different ways of doing math for different learners. These are kids who are like grade 3, grade 4. We're trying to teach me multiplication and saying, if you can't memorize the times tables, here's and look, I didn't even understand it, matrix multiplication way to do it. But what I got from that is wow, actually some kids can't memorize timetables, and maybe this works well for them. And so ultimately this strikes me as, it's not that there was only one way to do things. It was that there may be multiple learners with multiple different ways of doing things. And I'm worried that the new curriculum is focused on one kind of thinking. Look, I'm very good at rote memorization. It's my thing. And, memorizing times tables is something I'm really good at. But I also have to recognize not everyone's like that. And so to me, that's one of the biggest challenges here. And when Alberta students do so well internationally on things like math scores and standards, what was the problem we were trying to solve here? See, this is the problem of hiring an ex-politician as a moderator, because I have too many opinions on things. Let's get to the next question, which is, it looks like there are twice as many learning outcomes in the draft as there were in the current curriculum. Is that a problem? Shouldn't kids want to learn more? So why don't we start with Carla on this one?
Well, so let me just say, in the social studies curriculum, I don't actually think there are any outcomes at all. It's just long lists of knowledge. There's not actually anything that says students should be able to do, by the end of the grade or by the end of whatever. So that's problematic just on the face of it. It's actually not designed the way that curricula are supposed to be designed, by identifying, you think of an outcome as an end goal, right? If you want to take a summer vacation and get in your car and go on a trip and you don't care where you end up, then you just hop in the car and you drive off. But if you do care where you end up, you create a map, you create a plan, and so on, and you know where your pit stops are going to be, and you're going to know that when you get to the right destination that you've achieved your goal. A curriculum works like that. You need to know what the endpoints are going to be, and in order to be able to get students there. And the social studies curriculum doesn't have outcomes at all, really. It's just long lists of information. And this is what you get when you hire people who don't have any background in curriculum development, which is the case in the social studies curriculum, and frankly, across all of the areas. And I just want to say, I agree with Medeana. I mean, I think this thing is crap. It needs to be thrown out. It needs to be you need to start over. We need to involve teachers from the get-go. I was asked to find a couple of redeeming qualities, and believe me, those were backhanded compliments more than anything else. So yeah, it's long lists of information, completely impossible for kids in elementary grades to try and tackle that. And I mean, it's just going to be drive-by teaching, because there's no time to actually go into any depth.
Yeah, I'm starting to hear more and more that dump the draft, I think, is the right term.
Ditch the draft, yeah.
Draft, maybe the way to go here. Robin, your thoughts on learning outcomes and whether this curriculum is putting in too much, or if it's better to put more things in?
Well, what I notice with the English language arts curriculum is it's really organized quite differently than the present one. And the present English language arts curriculum really takes into account how language is learned. So one of the things that we think about when we think about English is we think about the language arts, those being reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, and visually representing. And what we know about how language develops, and I learned French as a second language, is that we don't, we need to understand that those things are interrelated, that we're going to learn a new language by, being exposed to it, being an immersive kind of environment, that we're going to be reading and writing, at the same time. And what the proposed curriculum does, it has 9 organizing ideas, and it actually presents the language arts in silos, something that we know is not how language develops. And so you have your silo related to reading, a silo related to oral language development, a silo related to writing. Now, this is how I started my teaching career. I remember being in a school as a new teacher, and the veteran teacher said to me, because I was a grade 1 teacher, Robin, we don't start teaching writing till December. And at the time, I'm also taking grad courses, and I'm reading, articles by James Britton, who's telling me reading and writing float on a sea of talk. And I'm reading books by Glenda Bissix and Marcia Bagban, who are showing that when children are writing as really young children, scribbling and making letters and so on, that it is actually informing their phonemic awareness and their phonics knowledge and helping to support them as readers. So in terms of, do they have to know more? I do think that the draft curriculum is erringly focused on knowledge. Do you know what a homonym is? Those kinds of things. But more importantly, it's organized in a way that is just not congruent with what we know about how language develops.
Thank you. Let me take this question to Medeana, if you have anything to add on this question of increasing learning outcomes.
Well, I do a little bit, because what I think this curriculum really misses is what children are like, and what we want as parents of kids when they start school. Teachers always ask me, what are you expecting out of your kid? What do you hope they gain this year? And my first answer is always, well, I really hope they fall in love with learning. And I really hope that they love going to school. And this idea of just drilling them with information and expecting, of course, we've talked a little bit about the inappropriate age inappropriateness of some of the content, but that is not going to spark curiosity in children. And I don't think it really speaks to the individualness of children and how they learn and how they interact. It's like we're trying to create little robots with this curriculum. And so that's how I feel about the content and that kind of mass content approach.
Yeah, it really feels to me like they didn't start with the question, just as we've heard from the other panelists, they didn't start with the question, what are we trying to accomplish here? I teach in a business school at a university, and I'm forever, well, not just me, but the business schools are forever being accused of not really belonging in the university because we actually teach people to be prepared for a career. But at the same time, I hope, also teach critical thinking skills. And also, I teach marketing, for example, and marketing is about the fundamental relationship between the buyer and the seller. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand how our society works. And so you have to do it at that level. And the point I'm trying to make is, I don't understand how you try to teach broad careerist skills to little kids. You don't know what they're going to be or what they want to do. Again, I'm giving my opinion, which is not what I'm here for. Angela, I'm going to go to you. And as I ask you about learning outcomes, I also want to ask you about the other interesting piece that we heard in the debate on the wellness curriculum around financial literacy. And I'll put all my cards on the table. The thing I was happiest about in this curriculum was financial literacy in every grade. Because when I get them and teach finance to them in university and they don't know what interest is or how a savings account works, that scares me. However, I'm not convinced the approach they're taking makes a ton of sense. Anyway, go ahead, Angela.
Okay, so when the curriculum was first released, and I can't remember which MLA that this was, but they declared that the outcome of education was that we should have students as trustworthy as used car salesmen. I don't know what that means. So Medeana's right in that they gave no thought to what the outcome for learners was, and they sure did not give any thought to anyone other than neurotypical average cognitive children. They gave zero thought to children with special needs and special learning abilities. So that is one very, very serious concern about this curriculum. There are going to be so many children left behind. So that's what I see as the outcome outcome for students. In terms of the outcomes in the curriculum itself, I agree. There's far too many. They don't make any sense in terms of scope and sequence of children learning. And so, like what Robin said, it's all in silos. You're going to learn this and then this and then this, but there's no consistency across it. So in terms of the second part about financial literacy. So I just want to say financial literacy was in the 2018 draft, and it was done in such a way that made sense for children. And it was integrated with math, it was integrated with social studies. So there was this broad scope and sequence of what it should look like. When I looked at financial literacy being added to the phys ed and wellness curriculum, literally all I can do is laugh at this. And if you look at it is a very distinct silo. We are teaching financial literacy in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6. And in kindergarten, you are going to learn the denominations of money. You're going to learn what money looks like. And you're also going to learn that credit cards are a form of money. Well, if we take that one statement and tear it apart, credit cards are not a form of money. They are a form of borrowing, and they're very specific. And so I tell you, parents of toddlers, you better get your kids a bank account and a credit card for show and tell in kindergarten, because that's what this curriculum asks for. What's happened with the financial literacy part, I firmly believe that it is this government trying to force something through that they believe is very important, and come hell or high water, they are going to put financial literacy in there no matter what. And I've looked at it from also a high school perspective, and some of the grade 6 financial literacy objectives are actually currently in the grade 11 curriculum and the CALM class for high school. So what they've done is taken very distinct financial literacy objectives and components and dragged it all down to kindergarten to grade 6. So we've got kindergartens learning about credit cards. We've got grade 5 students creating a household budget. So parents, you better, get your kids online and joint on your account so they can look over what you're doing. And then for grade 6, your kids are going to become little financial advisors about your RRSP, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. I'm sorry. My stepkids get an allowance, and all they want to know is, do I have enough money to buy chips and pop at the local corner store, and maybe go to Chapters and buy a book. They are not going to be interested in any part of this financial literacy. It's going to be like they talked about in the debaters: memorized, write the test, done, and no connection to their real lives.
Yeah.
How can we take a high school curriculum and move it down for 8-year-olds? It doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
why in phys ed?
Yeah.
Why in phys ed?
That's the part I didn't get either. And by the way, my recent high school graduate in my life would tell me that that particular curriculum, Career and Life Management 20, is also doesn't work at all. She did the entire course online in 10 days, and she said all her friends did because it was just rote memorization, get it over with. Anyway, let me ask a question now for Robin and Carla. So I'll ask you to get ready for this question, and we'll start with you, Robin. And it's something I alluded to earlier, is that according to PISA standards and other things, Alberta is known worldwide for success in education outcomes. Is this new curriculum going to mess that up? Robin?
Why would we get rid of a curriculum that is so successful on an international scale? It just, typically, whenever we think about revising curriculum, it's because we've looked at assessment data and we've noted that there's a problem, that we're not measuring up, not only, maybe across Canada, but internationally. Well, that's just not true. Right? We know that 15-year-olds in the PISA results in 2018, as you mentioned, came third third
in the world.
In the world. I mean, yay teachers, right? Because not only have they maintained those kinds of results, and I'm not a proponent of standardized testing, but nonetheless, they have maintained those standards while classrooms have changed. Well, our students coming in speak more languages than they've ever spoken before, right? And they have maintained those kinds of standards in reading. That tells me that our teachers are working extraordinarily hard when it comes to teaching the English language arts. So yes, I do think already we've been dropped in terms of our reputation for curriculum. So we've been part of the Western Canadian Protocol, that's going to go, right? When our students are placed internationally, they are often placed in schools that use the Alberta curriculum. That's going to end as well. So I don't understand why we are messing with a curriculum that is obviously working, does need revision, I want to say that, but is also so well considered that it's been adopted in so many other places.
The Northwest Territories has already abandoned our curriculum, I believe.
That's true.
And yeah, I echo much of what you're saying. Carla, your thoughts on this one? Is it going to make life worse even by these international standards?
Yes, I absolutely think so. Our reputation has already taken a hit. My colleagues in social studies education around the world are asking me what the heck is going on in Alberta. When the draft came out on March 31st last year, my friends across Canada said, is this an April Fool's joke? Are you sure that is this really the curriculum they're proposing? So our reputation has already taken a hit, and exactly right. Northwest Territories has said what is being proposed does not align with their values and goals for education for the students in Northwest Territories. I would also say, our teacher education program offers practicum experiences for students internationally at international schools around the world that use the Alberta curriculum, because then those students can be certified when they come back to Alberta. I wouldn't be surprised if international schools started to say this curriculum is not for us, and then that means fewer opportunities for teachers and students to have those international experiences. There's a lot of talk about TIMSS and PISA, so focusing in on mostly on math. The same organization that runs those national or international assessments also offers international assessments in citizenship and civics education. Unfortunately, Canada hasn't participated except for once back in the late 90s. But I can tell you, those studies on usually around grade 9 students and 90 or so more countries that participate, those studies show that in classrooms where there is an open climate for debate, for discussion, for hands-on activities, for real-world application of learning, that those students are better prepared to engage in society. And to engage in debates with fellow citizens, to be concerned about what's happening in their communities and want to look for solutions and work to make their world a better place. This curriculum, and I'm speaking specifically about social studies, is not going to set our students up to do that. There is zero application in the curriculum to connect anything that they're learning from a historical perspective to the present day or to the students' lives. And so this curriculum is going to fail on many levels.
Thank you for that, Carla. I'll take my next question for Angela and Medeana. And by the way, Angela, I looked up that quote. It was actually Angus Macbeth, the chair of the curriculum committee, who said, we want every young person who graduates through Alberta schools, we want them to be the kind of person you'd want to be selling you a used car because you can trust them. I have no idea what that means. But that was actually at the moment of the revelation of the curriculum. But the question that I have for Angela and Medeana is from a very concerned teacher who is saying, as teachers, we have a duty of care to our students. Is it possible to teach this curriculum while doing no harm? So I'll go to you first, Medeana, and your thoughts on that.
If the curriculum stays as is, particularly the social studies curriculum, which I know isn't is going back for so-called revisions, no, I actually don't think that's possible. They are minimizing the existence and the histories of important groups in our communities, racialized groups, particularly Indigenous communities. This is a huge departure from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You know, there's been a lot of Indigenous communities who've spoken out against this curriculum, are refusing it. The Francophone community is also refuting it. And your point about Muslims, I have a Muslim family. I look at this, some of these comments in this curriculum, and I think, you know, it's very much through a Eurocentric lens where there's a Christian dominance. And that is not how I, you know, just from a personal perspective, I grew up in rural Alberta, and of course there's racism and whatnot. But you know, there's one school, there's one high school. So regardless of religion, socioeconomic background, what have you, you're all together. And through that integration becomes all this learning and opportunity to learn from each other's diversity. And I think, you know, that's part of why I work with SOS, in fact, is to try to really elevate why public education is so important, is to break down some of this misunderstandings between different cultures and make sure that we try to build a harmonious society. And if this curriculum is passed, it will not do that. It will damage. It will damage that vision for public education, and it will be damaging for children.
Thank you, Angela.
So, you know, the first tenet of being a psychologist is do no harm. And when I look at the curriculum itself from that perspective, the curriculum itself will do harm. However, to answer your question about how teachers can avoid doing harm, the answer to that lies in who you are as a teacher, what type of training you have, and what willingness you have to go deeper. So I know it, like I've spoken at teachers' conventions for the past few years, and I teach the comprehensive school of health course at the University of Calgary. And so when we go into trauma-informed teaching, evidence-based practices, eating disorder prevention, health promotion, like using some of the brilliant resources that we have across Alberta, like Everactive Schools, the teachers that take that training will be able to take parts of the curriculum and put it through a lens of do no harm, what is best for the kids. However, the danger that this curriculum leaves teachers in is if you don't have that background, you're going to Google it. And where are you going to get your best practice resources from? So for example, I've spent 20 years studying comprehensive school health and working from that perspective, but not everybody is able to have that background. So there really is a risk of Googling it and giving kids resources and teaching in a way that is going to cause harm. You know, the other danger that I see in this is how First Nation, Métis, and Inuit content has been tacked on in these little silos. It's just thrown in there. For example, I believe it's grade 5. It's in First Nation, Métis, and Inuit use their community to help resolve problems. Well, how on earth, as a Caucasian teacher, without First Nation, Métis, Inuit training and background, how on earth would a teacher go ahead and teach that? There's just no sense, and it's really recklessly and thoughtlessly designed. So I do believe that teachers who put their kids first, who really know their kids, really have taken training in trauma-informed teaching, in healthy body image, in comprehensive school health and the multiple layers, they will be able to mitigate some of the harm. But what the biggest thing this curriculum is going to do is leave our teachers in a position of having 2 full-time jobs. You're going to have your job face-to-face with the children from 8 until 3:30. And then you're going to have your second job of how the hell am I going to teach this? And how am I going to put this together in a way that meets the kids' needs? We don't need our already stressed out teachers having 2 full-time jobs. It's hard enough as it is.
This is one of the things that I've been worried about, is the lack of materials really that we have for teachers to be able to implement this thing. It's the middle of March, folks. And if some of this is coming into place in September and so few boards have piloted it, how in the world are people going to be ready? And I just wonder if any of our panelists, I'll just open up to anyone who wants to jump in, have any thoughts on whether or not I mean, look, it's an obvious answer. The answer is no. But if you have anything further to say on whether teachers have the skills and not the skills, but the materials, whether they're adequately prepared to be able to start teaching this, and what the first couple of years might look like if not.
Well, you said it. No. A good curriculum is designed with curriculum, assessment, and resources all at the same time, so there's a logical flow. There is none. And honestly, like my students in comprehensive school health, I taught them for 5 weeks. They now know more about health curriculum and how to teach health and well-being and not cause harm than is present anywhere in this draft.
In 5 weeks.
In 5 weeks, in 15 hours, they now know more than what is present in this draft. And so I've armed them with a ton of resources. And I know Everactive Schools, like the ATA, puts out brilliant resources, but teachers should not have to be scrambling. And another frightening thing that I saw Minister Adriana LaGrange do was put out a call for businesses to come in and teach financial literacy. So the risk we're at now is teachers not having the resources and the government saying, oh, well, teachers can't teach this, so we're going to get businesses to come in and do it. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Carla, I see you want to jump in on this.
Thanks. And I think your question about resources is actually directly related to your question about will this curriculum do harm? And here's how I think that's connected. If children cannot see themselves reflected in the curriculum or the resources that are produced to support the curriculum, that does violence to those children. And right now, the curriculum has a complete absence of LGBTQ plus, S plus perspectives. The way that Indigenous perspectives have been included is token at best, and token is never good. It's so obvious because they're often added at the end of a long list of other things. So they're not even trying to hide. It's like, oh yeah, we better add this in. And then there are all kinds of other groups. Medeana pointed to some of them: Francophone, Black Albertans, Muslim Albertans. The list goes on and on and on. And in that way, because of the absence of those perspectives, and children will be unable to see themselves reflected in the curriculum and in the materials that will be produced to support it, which we haven't seen anything about, by the way. They should have been piloted along with the curriculum. This is going to do real harm to Alberta's children and their families.
Thank you. Carla, let me keep you on the hot seat for a minute for our next question, and I'll ask Robin, I'll ask you this question as well. But can you speak to the importance of embedding a variety of literacies and skills throughout the curriculum? Do you think that this does that?
One of my big criticisms of the social studies curriculum is that almost the complete absence of skills and processes and what we would call procedural knowledge, or the way you learn history, the way you learn geography, for example. Across the world, when social studies curricula are being written, they are including and paying specific attention to ensuring students know how historical knowledge is produced by engaging students in working with artifacts, working with evidence, analyzing how decisions about who is significant in the past, why statues get put up for this person and not for that person, actually getting kids engaged in that critical thinking that is absolutely necessary to understand the past. And then you could make similar sort of concepts and skills for geography, economics, and so on. That these are ways of thinking. And this current social studies curriculum does not include any of that at all. Students aren't actually going to be asked to think about anything. They're going to be asked to regurgitate information.
Robin?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to answer that question in two ways. The first one about, multiple literacies. I mean, this is an area of research that's really gained a lot of support over the last 20 years, and we don't see that in the English language arts curriculum. The most I saw was children will read digital and non-digital texts. Well, where do you develop the ability to question text, to find out who writes the text? What are they writing about? What aren't they writing about? So the idea of media literacy, I think, is completely overlooked in a curriculum that needs to prepare students for the next decade. And instead, it's sort of saying, well, let's just ignore that. Well, in this day and age, how can we ignore where our information comes from? What are the sources of our information? And it just doesn't deal with that at all. Kids are asking those questions. I mean, they watch the news, and it's not like we are shielding them from it. We can't shield them from it, but what we can do is give them the skills and the ability to, talk about what it is they see on the news and question it and question sources. So I would say a very big component that's missing in the English language arts curriculum has to do with media literacy. I send student teachers to the website Media Smarts so that they can become really familiar with the research in this area, and then take that knowledge and apply it into their unit planning and their lesson planning. So yeah, that's a huge hole. Curriculum's supposed to look forward. It's supposed to present a vision, and it certainly doesn't do that.
That may be the most chilling thing that I've heard tonight, particularly when we are thinking about the flood of misinformation and the flood of division in our community based on people not having the skills to be able to assess different sources of information. My mom is 81 and I am doing media literacy with her all the time. She's brilliant woman, but I have to say to her, Mom, so the rule I gave her was, Mom, if it sounds really surprising and you see it on WhatsApp, it's probably not true. And she looked at me and said, but why would people say things that aren't true? This is very chilling. If we're not being able to create that kind of citizen literacy, that really scares me.
Yeah. And the thing is, young children are excited and interesting to learn these kinds of things. I had a grad student who on a Saturday morning, she taped all of the cartoons that were geared, that, the toy makers are gearing towards a particular gender. And then, so she did boys and girls, and then she shared those with 5 and 6 year olds. And the children could say, that's not fair. Right. How come those toys are being geared toward, maybe I like those toys. So I think that's what bothers me, is that it's an underestimation of children's ability to think and to, delve into difficult issues through reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, and representing. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just got a note from someone who is an elementary school principal who reminds me that in her modified calendar school, she will be implementing this stuff on August 15th, which is 5 months from now, and she has no materials. Oof. Medeana, the government will say with some truth that parents were asking for a revision to the curriculum. And, my friends who are teachers are in some cases teaching the stuff that I learned when I was in high school 30 years ago. Why do we still study Brazil in that way, for example? But given that, the way the question is worded, I know what the answer is, which is, will this draft address these concerns and desires of parents? But maybe we can go a bit deeper than that and say, given that there is a need for modernization, I'm assuming you're going to say this draft does not meet that need. How could we meet that need?
I think what we need to recognize is that, yes, our curriculum needed to be modernized. We're all in agreement there. It was in the process of being modernized, and I think it was under an apolitical process, which has now shifted. So if this is implemented, I think kids will be prepared for 1950 instead of 2050 or 2030. And what we need to focus on is learning how to reason and 21st century competencies, right? We need critical thinking, analytical skills. We need to go beyond just literacy and numeracy. And I think the current curriculum does do that already. So this idea of going back to basics is just that. It's basic. Like, it is not deep thinking, and it doesn't teach us how to manage information and how to collaborate. It doesn't draw on creativity. And that is what we need to do. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, no, I really hear you. I wasn't a very good professor, don't get me wrong, but I taught thousands of students over the years. And over those years, what I really noted was that my own expectations of learning, and I'm not an education scholar, I've never taken an education course, but my own expectations of their learning needed to change. In a world where I can look up the quote for Angela in 1 second, why am I asking students to memorize lists of the various elements of advertising, for example? And so I really started to shift my thinking into far fewer exams. All of my exams were open book exams, but they all focused on application of processes rather than thinking about stuff. So that's my concern about back to basics, is maybe those basics don't work in a world where information is very different, where knowledge is something that exists out there, and the ability, as you were saying, Robin, to assess the sources of knowledge, to understand the good ones, and then to apply that in your life may be more important skills. And I just wonder, Medeana, if you have any reaction to that, or if anyone else has a comment, just give me a wave.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. I feel as though the curriculum is designed to basically supply what we can get from Google, and to not deeply question the world in which we are in and our place in it. And one other thing I actually want to bring up is a lot of the focus is on economic security of kids, and this idea that education is so focused on an economic outcome and on a job. And of course it is. We all want that for our children. We want them to have a bright future, but we're not talking a lot about being civically engaged citizens. And I feel like that takes education to a next level. And this is really, really failing our society on that front. And that's why more people than just parents need to care about this.
Yeah, I probably first started writing about the need for service learning and civics to be embedded in the curriculum 25 years ago when I was just an undergraduate. And I continue to believe that we have a role here in public education to help people understand how to be productive members of society. And yes, that does mean skills that'll help you get a job. It does mean understanding your financial literacy and not getting into debt and so on and so on. But it also means, understanding that you can't write a manifesto on your way to Ottawa that says the Governor General and the Senate are going to take over the government. And so figuring out how we can each be part of that in a society, I think, is an integral part of learning. And maybe that's putting way too much on teachers. Maybe that's asking schools to do things that faith organizations and families and workplaces need to do. But I'm missing that kind of holistic sense. And I'm just, any reaction to that?
Every
Robin?
teacher in a school is a citizenship educator, because every teacher in a school is helping children become the best people that they can be, whether they're teaching math, social studies, language arts, whatever, it doesn't matter. There is lots already in the social studies curriculum that's currently being used in schools to help kids learn about what it means to be a citizen. Including in grade 6, where they learn about the historical roots of democracy, but also they learn about the spirit of democracy. What are the key elements of living in a democratic society, and what are our responsibilities, including if you're 12 or 13 years old or 6 years old or whatever, to make our society a better place and contribute to our society. So that stuff is there. One of the big problems is that there's just social studies gets half hour a day. And so, you know, finding in elementary, teachers have a lot of power to be able to integrate topics and concepts and skills across the curriculum. And I know so many are doing that in an incredible way, but that stuff is there. But I agree with you, we can always use more in terms of civic education.
Robin?
I don't think it's specifically to civic education, but the general outcome number 5 in the English language arts curriculum right now really does talk about collaboration, working together, people being respectful of one another. I think it could go further, Carla, honestly, so that it probably does more of what you're talking about. So that would be, you know, a revision I could support. But it is in the English language arts curriculum, and my students are often really surprised to find out that when they're teaching reading and writing, that they're also focusing on helping children to get along and learn how to collaborate and listen to one another's voices in a similar way to, you know, us having listened to our 2 debaters, right? You can listen and entertain different ideas without necessarily accepting them. And so I do think that's in our ELA curriculum right now. I think more could be done since we're talking specifically about citizenship, but it's there.
What's fascinating to me about the government's critique of the previous draft curriculum was the way in which they weaponized this conversation about citizenship and really made it sound like, oh, the NDP curriculum is going to indoctrinate your kids into being little socialists. And the work that was actually there was saying things like, as you say, stuff that's in the current curriculum around be good to each other. That as human beings, we actually have a responsibility beyond our own, at the ends of our noses, to other people. And here's a pitch for all of you teachers in the room. One of the things I am doing in retirement is I have relaunched the National Community Service Program that we launched out of Calgary some years ago called 3 Things for Canada. And the idea is encouraging everyone to do 3 acts of citizenship or community service every year. It's that simple. So if you want to implement that in your schools, feel free to do so, 3thingsforcanada.ca. Angela, I'm going to ask you to look into a dystopian future for us for a moment, maybe a utopian future. What will it look like? What will it look like in the classrooms in September, in the elementary school classrooms where this new curriculum is being implemented, and in future years?
Okay, well, before I answer that, I'm just going to tag on to what Carla and Robin just said, is in this new draft, the 2021 draft, I really see it as individualistic and navel gazing. It's a lot of facts to deal with yourself, and it's not a lot of collaboration in working with other people. So that leads into your question of, basically, I look at this curriculum as, you know, a 1950s classroom with every child in their desk with their piece of paper or their slate and their chalkboard, and the teacher cramming facts at them, kids having to try to memorize, teachers trying to get kids back on memorizing these facts. And there's not going to be a lot of space for group work for art, for exploration, for being creative, for critical thinking, for sharing your own ideas about things, because teachers have to cram through so much information to do their job according to this curriculum. So, and because, like what Carla pointed out, with the lack of LGBTQ2+, with the lack of First Nation Métis Inuit content, with people from other and I don't like to use the word other cultures. I don't know what other word to use, but people from varying backgrounds. If kids don't see themselves in it, then they're going to be bored, they're going to be miserable, they're going to ask questions that can't be answered because there's no time. They're not going to be making good health decisions for themselves because health can't be taught in a silo as well. And it's going to be miserable. The other side I see of that is teachers being miserable. Our teachers are already stressed out of their heads talking about retiring and or talking about retiring early, leaving the province, going somewhere else. And to add this horrible draft curriculum onto an already stressed out profession, it's going to collapse. And that's why we're working so hard to ditch the draft, because we can see it's going to be an epic fail. And if this government continues to ram it through, and there could be a really fantastic revolt coming up. So really, it's either going to be stopped and handed back to the teachers so that we can do our jobs and do it well, or it's going to end in a giant disaster.
Okay, that's pretty dystopian. We're coming into the home stretch here of our conversation, and I know there have been so many questions, and 400 people have stuck with us on this Friday night, and I know we haven't gotten to a lot of discussion about the science or the fine arts curriculum and a lot of other questions that folks have. But there's a question here that I'd love our panelists to address, and you know what? I'm going to take off my moderator hat and I'm going to address this one too. I do have a little bit of experience in this area. And the question is this. This conversation has really opened my eyes to the grave concerns about the proposed curriculum. What can I as a parent do to speak out against this draft? And more important, how can we get a better curriculum instead of the one that's proposed? Medeana, let's start with you.
Okay, so the website that we have, Students Deserve Better, has a lot of resources there. You can write your MLA, you can activate your school council, and I actually really recommend sending a group letter from your school council. There's actually a lot of power and legislative power that school councils have. The Association of School Councils of Alberta has already put forward a position on the curriculum in disagreement with it, but it's really an important thing for community centers even and school councils to activate in that way and send a letter to their local MLA. You need to share what you learned tonight. You need to activate your communities, have conversations. And being one person just sending an email over and over again is enough. You need several different people. I feel like you wanted to say something there. Did I cut somebody off?
No, keep going, keep going.
No, keep going. Join us, support our Students Alberta. We are a group of volunteers, and we're working very hard to support public education. The curriculum is an important issue. We are working very hard to raise awareness. You can even get lawn signs. We've disabled that right now while the election is happening in Fort McMurray, but you'll be able to get them again in the spring. But have conversations and let people know why this matters and why it matters to more than just students in K-6. 7 to 12 is next. So get ready.
Thank you very much. Robin.
So I've been wondering the same thing, and I really appreciate those suggestions, Medeana, because I think anything that gets people talking and together, and sending, as you say, letters together, as groups of people might get further than those that we've written, which from individuals. So I appreciate those suggestions for sure. I do think that one of the things that we have to think about is, are we prepared to fight this as hard as we need to try to stop it? And I do think that means going further, going as far as we possibly can. Carla, you've been amazing at, bringing people together and, protesting in ways that are peaceful and thoughtful. And I worry that if we don't do that, it's just going to roll over on us. But I do appreciate, Medeana, your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Let's go to Angela.
Well, I'll just say I'm really tired. So when the draft came out in March 2021, the next week was Easter holidays. It was supposed to be my week off. I spent 50 hours in 3 days. I'm sure I drove my husband crazy because 2 in the morning, I'm like, can you believe this about the curriculum? So I did a review. I sent it to the Minister of Education, the Premier, the ATA, school boards. And then that's when Carla approached me and said, hey, I read your review. Would you be interested in being on the steering committee for the Alberta Curriculum Analysis website? And so I said yes. And that's where we got this outpouring of reports and reviews by educators saying every single area of this draft curriculum has problems. Carla and I and some parents and other teachers have been on, radio talk shows and The Breakdown with Nate Pike and the Forgotten Corner podcast and Ryan Jesperson, and we've been speaking and speaking and speaking. I wrote an open letter to parents. I wrote an open letter and sent it to every single MLA saying, you need to do your job here. This is a problem. I have never written so many letters. Carla and I did a rally in September in Edmonton for a quality curriculum for Alberta. A couple of hundred people showed up. It was great, but we need to, honestly, the experts and the teachers have done their jobs. There's a 99% non-confidence vote in the Minister of Education. We have spoken out so incredibly loudly, and now it really is up to the parents.
Yeah.
So parents need to, reinvent and just go to the SOS website. Like Medeana said, there's a letter you can send to your MLA. And I'll tell you, on April 2nd, we are planning. So Carla and I've been working on this. We are planning a provincial rally of where Red for Ed stand together. We've got major centers. So the legislature in Edmonton, McDougall Center in Calgary, the City Hall in Grand Prairie. We're working on locations in Lethbridge and Red Deer. We're saying if you're in a rural area, then go stand, chalk, wear red at your MLA's office. Tell your local media. We're going to have a provincial media statement about it. We absolutely have to stand together, Red for Ed for public education, and a very strong message of ditch this draft, because it is crystal clear that this government is ramming it forward no matter what. We have the leader of the opposition saying if they're in power, then they're going to ditch this draft within 100 days and return it back to teachers. But we have to tell everyone, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunties, uncles, business owners, we have to stand together and say collectively, absolutely no, stop this now.
Thank you. Carla.
I think that we absolutely need a groundswell of grassroots organized, strategic, well-planned, passionate mobilization of Albertans from all walks of life. And to the group of people that have already been named, parents, aunties, uncles, and so on, I would also add students. Bring student voices to the table. Ask them, what kind of education do they want? What is the future that they want to create for themselves? And bring those voices to the table as well. We've got to really demonstrate, and as Robin said, we've got to really show a commitment to not accept this curriculum. It is not nearly close enough to the kind of quality that Alberta students and Alberta families and Alberta teachers deserve. It is not going to keep, if reputation is something that matters to you, it's not going to keep Alberta's reputation where it is today. But more importantly, it's going to do harm to kids. It's not going to prepare kids for the complicated, complex society that we live in. It's not going to help them navigate social media and, you know, should you take ivermectin to solve this problem or that problem? It's not going to help them with those kind of critical thinking skills that are so desperately needed in our society. And we've got to use it. We've got voices, we've got to use them, and we've got to do it in a sustained way. It can't be one day worth of work. It's got to be now until September. And then on after that.
You know, thanks so much to all of you. This is really important. And this is where I do, with permission, get to take off my panelist hat, or take off my moderator hat, while reminding all of you that the views expressed on this segment by the panelists and by myself do not necessarily represent the views of the Alberta Teachers Association nor Calgary Public Teachers Local 38. I know you're exhausted. I know all of you are exhausted. This is the fight of our lives. And prior to the last provincial budget, people were asking me, what do you expect? And I was saying, listen, the only thing I'm worried about is anything in there that will do irreversible harm. And so many people have said to me, well, surely there's an election in a year. We can deal with everything at the election in a year. The curriculum is what will do irreversible harm to our province. We cannot let up the fight. We have to get louder than we have ever been. For better or worse, in the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of people get involved in the political process who've never been involved in the political process before. And for them, they got heard. With all the criticisms you might have, they got heard. It's time for us to get heard. So we got to get loud. When I was 20 years old, I managed to come together in the 1993 provincial election with a group of people representing students, parents, and teachers across the province. In the end, we represented about 200,000 Albertans in a time where the population of Alberta was 2.5 million, I think, talking about education. And it went from a situation where all the party leaders were asked at the beginning of the election, what are your top 10 priorities? And only one of them mentioned education as number 9. The other two didn't mention it at all. By the end of it, the Liberal leader and the Conservative leader both made speeches saying if elected, they would be the education premier. That was their final speech. So we moved the needle. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit of realpolitik right now. Up until about 3 weeks ago, this was a provincial government that was terrified for its own existence. And there were real opportunities to be able to influence what they were doing while they were in power. At this moment, the premier is feeling real good about himself. He put forth a balanced budget. He ended all the public health restrictions. Everybody loves him. And he's focused only on April the 9th. We have to make this an issue before April the 9th as loudly as we possibly can. And that means, and you heard it, involving parents and parents talking to all the other parents in school, all the moms groups, all the dads groups, all the parents around at the athletics, the soccer and the hockey and everything else. We got to get people activated and motivated across party lines. Go to the SOS website, join the organization. They're doing really good work. It's textbook advocacy. Write the letters. Write the letters. It really matters, and send them with a stamp as opposed to by email. It really makes a difference, and people really will respond to you. Phone your MLA's office, even if they ignore you. And you can say, look, I know you can't say anything about the curriculum because you got to toe the party line, but I need you to know I voted for you and I will never vote for you again if you don't stop this curriculum. You got to be that blunt, and you got to show up. April the 2nd, you got to show up. You got to get there in numbers like they've never seen before. You got to make the anti-vax and anti-mask convoys look like nothing compared to the number of parents and students that we get out wearing red on that day, which is not coincidentally, I think, 1 week before April the 9th.
I actually wanted it to be on April the 1st because this is a joke, the way education in this curriculum is being done in Alberta. But April 1st is a Friday. We're going to get more numbers on the Saturday. Yeah. And that's why, like, we're creating rally packages, like protests. It's easy. Like, it's going to be easy. And if anyone has a way that we can live stream the speeches that Carla is going to lead in Edmonton and I'm going to lead in Calgary, if we can get those live streamed across the province, brilliant. I just don't know how to do that. But I 100% agree with you. We need numbers, we need bodies, we need media awareness, and we cannot stop.
And you got to drag everybody out. And I'll say this too, and this is controversial. It does not represent the views of the sponsoring organizations. I am so tempted to buy a membership so I can vote on April the 9th. Membership cutoff is March the 10th, just so you know. So I need you to visit 2 websites, please. Get smart by visiting Carla's website at alberta-curriculum-analysis.ca and join Support Our Students Alberta. And I think the best website to go to is studentsdeservebetter.ca, or you can go to supportourstudents.ca. This is the stuff that matters. This is the stuff that is going to make a difference. Now, I see Bob has shown up on the screen, but I am going to indulge me a little bit, please, on a Friday night. And I'll literally give each of our panelists 1 more minute in case there's anything that you needed to say tonight that we didn't get to. So we'll start with Medeana.
I just wanted to just really hammer home that there is a consensus, a unanimous consensus against this curriculum. It is everybody but the current government that recognizes that this is going to fail our kids, that it is not going to prepare our children, and it's going to do damage to our society. And I really hope that everybody here takes it upon themselves to try to motivate the people around them. People need a nudge and they need a reason why. Mm-hmm. And you have to find their reason why and try to connect with them and make them see that this is really, really critical. And I just want to say that I appreciate everybody's work on this. And a shout out to any of the teachers who teach my kids that are on this call. All my kids go to CBE schools, and I am forever grateful for the work that you guys do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla.
I also want to begin with a thank you to all the teachers and families who have had probably the hardest 2 years of their careers/lives that they can remember and are absolutely exhausted for good reason. And so thank you for your continued efforts on behalf of Albertan kids and society at large. We need everybody on this call to commit to talking to 2 people this weekend about the curriculum. And then next weekend, talk to 2 more. And then 2 more. Do you remember that old shampoo commercial? And I told 2 friends, and so on and so on. This is what we need. We need people to commit to a concrete action and not just walk away saying, okay, now I've learned some things, that's good. I mean, that's also important to learn. Don't get me wrong, and to feel informed and so on, but do something with that knowledge, no matter, I don't care what it is, but do something with the knowledge.
Thank you, Angela.
So a couple of things. So first of all, we have to remember that we have a gift that is waiting for us, and it is the 2018 draft curriculum. It is still there. It is a gift. It was collaboratively and nonpartisan written by our provinces and nations experts, and it deserves to be piloted. So all is not lost. We have that gift. I also want to put some dollars into this. That gift was $64.4 million. Jason Kenney has just said he is going to put 119 million into implementing his garbage draft. So it's already 3 times as much plus whatever was spent, whatever he spent on getting his buddies to write it. So we also have to put the numbers of 32,000 Albertans and over 350 educational experts wrote the 2018 draft that is a gift. And that has been replaced by Jason Kenney's 12, well, I think maybe there's 19 now, hand-appointed buddies to write his political, military, and Christian ideology into this garbage curriculum. So we absolutely have to stand together to shift this. We have to get to a critical mass and a tipping point. And so just to reiterate what Carla said, tell everybody. And if all you can do is throw on a red sweatshirt and show up on April 2nd at your local UCP MLA's office or one of the rallies and take a stand, make a phone call, send the letters. We absolutely need to stand together on this. So that's my final 2 cents.
Thanks very much. Robin, bring us home.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be a part of this discussion. And I think what I want to say is we are teachers. And we are teachers because we care about kids. And if we keep in mind that we are fighting for children, I think that will propel us forward. I'm only a teacher educator because I hoped I'd be able to make a difference in the lives of children. I care so much about my student teachers, but honestly, they're not the most important thing. It's the kids in classrooms whom they are going to become teachers for that truly matter. And so I think that's what I wanted to leave us on is think about your children, your nieces, your nephews, think about a child going forward. And I think that will give you and me, I'm a new grandmother, the strength to fight for something that our children deserve, which is a strong, healthy future. So I would just ask us to keep children in mind going forward.
On that note, let's hear it for this magnificent panel. You can't clap, so I will put in a sound effect. Clap at home. This has been so great. Dr. Carla Peck, Dr. Robin Bright, Dr. Angela Grace, Medeana Moussa, thank you for helping us out here. And I am going to end on a less dystopian note. And I'm going to remind you all that because of the work of generations of people, we have built right here in this city and in this province, the very best public education system in the world. That's something we should be proud of. Every single day, kids from every possible background show up at school, and we know that they're going to be okay. No matter where they've come from, they're going to be all right. And that's because of the work that so many have put in, and mainly because of the work of the world's best teachers. So as bad as things might get, even if that curriculum goes into September's, you know what? The teachers got it. They know what they're doing, and they will always, always put our kids' best interests at heart. And speaking of extraordinary teachers, let me take you back to one of them. Thank you for your leadership, Bob. Here's Bob Cocken.
Thank you so much, Naheed, for the privilege of your company tonight and for leading us through the panelist discussion. It was truly amazing. We truly appreciate your time, Naheed, and the time of all the panelists. What a wonderful experience that was this evening. So this is an important topic and one that a lot of people have very strong feelings about. It's our hope tonight that you're leaving with more information than you had at the start. Every Albertan should add their voice to the process. We strongly encourage you to contact your MLA and the Minister of Education and tell them what you think of the draft curriculum and how you feel it could be improved. And attend that rally on April 2nd. I think it's one way again that we can show the strength and our feelings about it. So I'd just like to say on behalf of Calgary Public Teachers, thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday night to join us in learning about the draft curriculum. So good night, everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.